Hafaday, and good morning. Let's go ahead and convene. The Subcommittee on Charter Schools, Public Libraries, and Technology Centers hereby convenes this roundtable. Public hearing notices were given to the media. The first notice was on Thursday, June 21st, 2018, and the second notice was on Monday, June 25th, 2018. For the record, today is Wednesday, June 27th, and the time is now 1:05 p.m. I want to first go ahead and acknowledge the Speaker. Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker, for joining us. And also the Chairman of the Committee on Education is here with us. Chairwoman Feo Valles, thank you. Chairperson of the Council, Amanda Blas, thank you for joining us. Also, other council members are present. General rules for the roundtable. Those testifying will be recognized in order of the sign-in sheet. Written testimony may be read. I encourage you to summarize lengthy written testimony as it will be submitted into the record. Testimony should be confined to the substance of this public hearing. Persons will be allowed to present oral testimony once. When you're done, you may be asked to remain in the room for questions. When you speak, please make sure that the microphone is on and that you speak into the microphone. Please state your name for the record. I just want to go ahead and, before we begin, just ensure that everybody has a copy of the agenda. I want to, in the interest of time, and then we can address all items on the agenda, but I really would like to focus a majority of our time and effort on Guahan Academy Charter School, and then perhaps with the assistance of Chairman San Agustin, go ahead and address some of the policy concerns, whether it's a deficiency in the statute, as one may perceive it, or some other opportunities for improving the overall governance processes. To be clear, the primary purpose of today's meeting is to meet and openly discuss at least three main questions, to openly discuss some of the circumstances that have brought us here today in terms of Guahan Academy's situation. I'd also like to discuss, having acknowledged those statements of fact, what the potential plans are in the event any one of the scenarios are likely, whether it's closure of the school by August, whether GDOE perhaps would subsume operations, or whether or not we're able to come at a solution that provides some kind of an interim extension to the existing charter. Nonetheless, I'd like to share that it is my hope that our thoughts that can be expressed here today are designed so as to come to some kind of solution. The third question then would be, going forward after we understand what happened and resolve what may happen, how can we prevent those things from reoccurring in the future so that other charter schools have an increased likelihood of success? And so with that said, Madam Chair Fay, if you want to just go ahead, or any member of the Guahan Academy Charter School, I would encourage you to come to the round table, or this oblong-shaped table, and just state your name for the record, and then go ahead and give us kind of a summary of some of the circumstances that have led us to this point today.
Good afternoon, Senator Will Castro. I do not have a copy of the last testimony that we prepared for Bill 19134, but I could remember vividly that there were several things that we thought was a good part of this bill. Part of it is the makeup of the membership, which we encourage that we have to have GCC, since all the charter school is gearing towards current technical education. Good afternoon, Senator San Agustin. So that's one of the part of the bill that we thought we endorsed, and we have that in our testimony. We'll give you a copy of our testimony from the last time that we had this publicly heard through Senator San Agustin. In the membership was including the Guam Community College, and we welcome that. Of course, we welcome that designation, and we welcome that membership. And I think above all is the separation of the budget, because that's where basically it ended as to whether the charter school budget should be separated from the Department of Education. And that pretty much is the whole substance of this bill as far as like the Guahan Academy Charter School is concerned. We're very concerned about how the budget would be where the rest of the money will be identified, away from the Department of Education, if indeed this becomes into a law as is it introduced or it's being discussed right now. I think that's the cry for every one of us here to see that there is that this separation of the budget happens under the Bill 19134. That's all that I can say, Senator. I'll give you the rest of the information or the copy of our testimony. I think we have not pretty much changed our stand on Bill 19134, and we will give everybody a copy. Unfortunately, we're running late on and giving you those. My apologies.
Thank you. I'm sorry if I misspoke. Thank you for your input on Bill 191. Maybe perhaps to reset this, I'd like to start with the first question is, if we could discuss very briefly some of the circumstances that have led us to where we're at today in terms of the impending action with Guahan Academy Charter Schools. And maybe I missed it, but really also I spoke with a few council members. The goal here today is to communicate clearly in no unprecise terms that the stakeholder groups at this table, as represented by Guahan Academy, the council, we also have a representative from the governor's office, you have the oversight committee chairman, and you have representatives from the Department of Education. It's important to communicate today to the island that we have at least thought about in some deliberate fashion as to all the potential scenarios that may face Guahan Academy. It's important because school may start in 60 or fewer days. Maybe they correct me on the exact time frame. But as a fellow educator, which some of you are, that's foremost in my mind. And so we can get a better understanding for the record. I'd like to put that on the table, and anybody can jump in. And I'm hoping it's okay. Hold on, Madam Chair. I'm hoping we can maintain some decorum, and then let's talk about the different scenarios, and then let's talk about how to fix it so that one or more of those scenarios have a high chance or probability of succeeding.
Thank you, Senator. I'm sorry. I missed the clue on that one. My apologies. You didn't coach me now. But anyway, I think this is really, I really appreciate Senator Sanagiston and Hagulok Senator well. We really appreciate the time and the effort you're trying to resolve some of our issues. Most of it is really more internal on the allotments that were not being paid. There's really nothing that we can talk about except, the accreditation and whatever changes we're now doing and the work that we're doing with WASC. So moving forward on the candidacy that was temporarily withheld from the charter school. I guess we're open to any more concerns. A lot of these concerns that were written up on the resolution or the board resolution that the Department of Education had stipulated on that resolution are primarily resolved. Some of those issues were we're already given documents after documents on where those on some of the wrong assumptions of DOE. There's also some mention on the substantive changes that we supposedly have not reported back to us. But a litany of so many things that, looking at the resolution, really it did not. It's just like deja vu on things that we already resolved. And it's not coming up on the surface just because it's the non-support probably, or just non-acceptance of what the council have decided as far as like our 5-year renewal is concerned. So I don't know, Senator, I'll open the table for any more concerns that are going to come about. As I said, most of these assumptions and some of the things that were mentioned there were pretty much resolved and explained. It's never outstanding. None of those are outstanding except for some procurement issues that probably were lacking documentations. They were correcting them. Right now, we're preparing for the next school year and doing our best to make sure that we have the facilities for the school. We have adopted the 740 enrollment as stipulated on the last budget law, and sprucing up the facilities right now, taking our enrollment. I believe the deans could tell you where we are on the enrollment. So we're all ready for the 2018-2019 school year. That's all I can say for now, Senator. And any more suggestions and any more things that we could do for the betterment of GACS? We are here to open dialogue with anybody in the council and everybody else, the rest of the stakeholders who are here today, to continue to better our operation. And I thank you for this opportunity at all times, Senator. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Good afternoon, Senator Castro, and of course, Mr. Chairman, Senator Jolson Augustin, and the Speaker, B.J. Cruz. Just for the record, my name is Sal Babauta, and I'm a member of the Charter School Council, and in addition to that, I am a resident from Agate. Hey, as a matter of fact, with regards to Guahan Academy Charter School, I was just up at the school site, and I met with the chairperson of the trustees and the treasurer, and I clearly stated to them that we need to make sure that that we prepare the school and ensure that it's ready for opening. I spent many years in the United States Air Force supporting the opening of schools in Germany, and I am perfectly aware of the process with regards to school opening preparations. But Senator Castro, I want to reemphasize some of what I stated in some of the other meetings that we had right here at the Congress building. On the 18th of December 2017, I appeared before you, Chairman San Augustine, and the Speaker, only after 2 months of being a member of the Charter School Council, because I realized that the way we were operating is not the right way of doing things. At that testimony, and I quote, I stated that I suggest that the Guam Charter Schools Council be abolished and transfer the governance of the Guam Academy Charter Schools to the Guam State Board of Education and the Department of Education Superintendent, and the following are my reasons. One, the GDOE has the necessary administrative capability to effectively provide significant oversight of the charter school program and satisfy statutory requirements. Moreover, it has the technical expertise to assess the health of the Guam Academy charter schools relative to student achievement and management of resources. On the contrary, Guam Charter School Council does not have such administrative capacity. Currently, the Charter School Council members lack administrative support, office space, computers, administrative equipment, and supplies to effectively perform statutory mandates, unquote. Here is a copy of my testimony, December 18, 2017. As a matter of fact, I was told by a member of the GEB Guam Education Board that a senator had asked her if she supports my suggestion. Because of the no resources, not a single administrative support, the council has not fulfilled the mandates of the law. The following are what this council has not been able to accomplish. Number one, this council has had no meeting minutes, at least since October 2017, no meeting minutes. Number two, the council has not promulgated administrative rules and regulations consistent with the provisions of Title V GCA Chapter 9. With the exception of Superintendent Fernandez, of course, as Superintendent of GDOE, and Chairwoman Blas, the rest of the council members have not received a single penny of stipend that they are due. As a matter of fact, I urge you, Chairman San Augustine, to write to the AG and request clarification whether the chairwoman can be a valid member of the Guam Charter School Council. There is nothing in the law, that states that a member of the council can be from the government of Guam. Moreover, her membership, in my view, is in conflict of interest because she is presently the governor's executive director for Commission on Decolonization. On some of her message traffic, she clearly indicated that she is the executive director. Jeez. I have a copy of a message traffic, but I have been asking for copies of the Guam Charter School Council historical documents so I can review previous actions of the Council. Until now, I don't have any copies of that. The Council has not been able to effectively monitor the activities of the charter schools because it does not have any support staff nor resources. I take this very sadly that there hasn't been any support at all for the Charter School Council, and many individuals within the governor's staff and previous members of the council and members of the council currently have been exposed to these types of situations, but yet we have not received any type of resources or support to make sure that this council performs its duties and responsibilities. During the last Charter Schools Council meeting, Dr. Vilma Sablan, an education professor at the University of Guam, stated that the test scores of students she assessed at the Guam Academy Charter School are higher than their counterparts at GDOE. Dr. Sablan has been assessing the same target populations for at least a couple of years. Senator Castro and Mr. Chairman, Guam Academy Charter School, without question, has many challenges of its own. However, do we want to terminate a school where students are progressing? Or do we want to amend the charter schools law and allow the school to continue and provide guidance and support to its leadership and management? There may be a need to restructure the makeup of the Board of Trustees to ensure that the leadership and management of the school is handled as such, based on the Guam Charter Schools law. And Mr. Chairman and Senator Castro, I want to emphasize also that I just learned the other day that the I Learn Charter School has been progressing very well, and I commend them for all the outstanding achievements that they've been able to accomplish. But they are still in the candidacy status. They have not been accredited. So Senator Castro and Mr. Chairman, really, in all honesty, I come before you to help or do what I can to work together as a team to make sure that the progress that these kids are achieving continue to exist, and that we come together as leaders in this community with regards to education to do all that we can to ensure that we address whatever is currently the challenges of the Guam Academy Charter School. And with that, I want you to know that I voluntarily took on the task of being or working with the accreditation team of the Guam Academy Charter School to see if we can begin to bring them back in the right direction towards accreditation. But I firmly believe that we as a team of educators and leaders ought to get together and come up with a solution to address the challenges of the Guam Academy Charter School and continue and not terminate the student achievements that are currently occurring at the Guam Academy Charter School. Thank you, Senator Castro and Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Council Member Babalta. I have a follow-up question. So
Yes,
you were clear in your testimony that your recommendation that the GEB and superintendent, that the council itself be abolished and that they take over the role of the council. I think that's clear here.
If we continue to not have any type of resources
Gotcha.
and support,
Understood.
absolutely.
I have a follow-up question.
Yes, sir.
And it's more central, aside from the governance, to me, it's more central to addressing the Guam Academy situation right now. Would you suggest, is it fair to make an assumption, and please correct me, that you're also suggesting that DOE subsume operations and management of Guahan Academy, or is that not the same?
No, I don't.
Okay.
That is not more. That's not part of my suggestion for solution.
Thank you. I just want to be emphatically clear with that. Thank you, Mr. Babalta. And now, Councilwoman Blas. Chair.
Hi, just for the record, my name is Amanda Bloss, and I am the Guam Academy Charter School Council Chairwoman. So thank you again to our oversight chairs for having us today. I do want to make a couple of clarifications in response to Councilmember Babalta's statement. First, let's address the conflict issue that he did bring up. I have reviewed the law regarding boards and council, and I believe there's only a conflict where you cannot be appointed to 2 government councils or boards at a time. Just for clarification, as Executive Director on the Commission on Decolonization, I am not actually on the Commission on Decolonization Commission, so I have no vote, and I just serve as the Executive Director. And I believe all the senators were aware that I was appointed to Commission on Decolonization Executive Director prior to the vote for my nomination, and I believe 14 senators did confirm me, so thank you again for that opportunity. Second thing for clarification with the Education Board and the Charter School Council. There's a couple of concerns that I was going to bring up during the next meeting, but because it was discussed already in this roundtable, I'd like to state it today. If you look at the charter school law, it states that the Education Board is a policy board, and DOE, we have representatives who can correct me if I'm wrong. And then I believe in the definition on the Charter School Council is an authorizing board. So therefore, the roles and the duties are a bit different. So if the council is abolished or the Education Board absorbs our responsibilities, I did have questions of how would that affect either, and that's something I think that needs to be working out just because of the nature of the councils and boards themselves. As for the lack of resources, we do have minutes. I do send out minutes through email, of course. And yes, I acknowledge we have a lack of resources. That's true. We don't have resources. But at this time, we're going to have to continue to move forward. If that means that I have to absorb the administrative duties, that's what I will do. If we're going to start farming things out among council members to share the responsibility, that's what I will do. But either way, this council was put up, I was appointed to this council, we all were appointed to this council. So regardless of the lack of resources, we must continue to do things. We have deadlines that we must adhere to the law. We followed open government with meeting notices, with public hearings, and I'm sure Gax as well can testify to that we do keep with the public hearing and all the requirements that we have, as well as the charter school applicants that have come forward, that we have kept in line with that. As far as the stipend, that it would be an administrative concern, of course, and I actually have been working on that with DOA. So it's not an active effort not to pay the council members. That is something I've been working on as well. And just for clarification, I did send out the letter to the Attorney General that Senator San Augustine did send out regarding an opinion on the charter renewal vote. So all the council members should be in possession of that, as well as the Education Board resolution and the internal auditor report that was sent out last night. And just even, like I said, this was something that I was going to discuss with the council members. Obviously, we are all here in voluntary positions, so our schedules are a little bit, they're not as fixed as we'd like. I was planning to schedule a meeting regarding those 2 efforts. So if there's any other clarifications or whatnot, I'm happy to answer.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Castro, can I make a comment? I have never voted for approval of any minutes for the Charter School Council, for the record.
Okay, you know what? Let's go ahead and reserve comment maybe for another opportunity where we can discuss the operations of the council. Maybe that's a part of the reason. I like your initial point that we need, or your ending point, that we need to come together and hopefully to address the second question of what's the next step given the current situation. And I was advising everybody here, both when you got here and prior, that it's my deepest intent that we don't turn this into an oversight of the council or of the Board of Education or of Guahan Academy itself. That is not the motive for us to be here. I think you hit it on the head when you said we need to come together as leaders. So I'm going to take a couple more comments, hopefully not go too deep into the weeds into council operations, and then I'm going to defer to my chairman of education, and then we can possibly hear from someone else on another contributing factor to how we got here today. And we'll wrap that up in a few minutes so we can address really why we're here. Madam Chair.
So maybe we can work with the members on assigning roles. Maybe we can assign a secretary so I don't also take care of the meeting notices. And I believe the senators here and all our council members know I have never missed a meeting, a round table, a work session, whatnot. I have stayed dedicated, and I believe you can talk to my commission members as well, whether that affects the duty. But just wanted to put that out there as well.
Thank you. Let's wrap that up. Just so you know, I think no one's really questioning your integrity here. And we'll reserve comment on how we can improve the operations. Admittedly, I can acknowledge that the council and both you restated it twice now, Mr. about the need for additional resources. So I'll get with the chairman and hopefully the governor's authorized representative and members of the education board to see how we can help. Okay, but there's a more impending critical issue before us that's just weeks on the outset. With that said, Mr. Chairman, you have the floor.
Thank you, Senator Castro. Just want to make it very clear to everybody that's here. The Organic Act is very specific. The governor of Guam will provide an education to everybody on Guam, okay? As the Guam Education Board wants to sever ties with the charter school, based on the law on the charter school, it's only to receive the budget from the council and send it to the legislature. So anything to do with education is going to be wrapped up, unfortunately, under the title DOE. But DOE is responsible, under the Organic Act, to provide funding to all schools. So I'm just kind of hesitant to, I would love to see it severed, where the council has separate funding, but it just doesn't work that way. When it comes out of the legislature, it's one pot. But it is divided. It does identify what's going to DOE, what's going to the charter schools, and that's just how it flows. So we need to just slow it down just a little bit. I know for a fact that the council has never had any help for the many years. We also have to remind it, just like you, Mr. Babata, Ms. Blas, and every other member in the council other than Mr. Tovis, you just got in 2018. The two was in 2017. So did Senator Castro and I. We were trying to amend the bill, the Organic Act, or the Guam Code on the charter school to try to help the charter school council. And that's a very hard task when the funding is not available. Okay, because initially you're supposed to get support from the Certification Commission. That's how Ms. Rosa Paloma was getting it. And I'm still waiting also for minutes of prior to your membership to see if the council was working with Guam or any other, I guess you were the only charter school at the time. If they were helping you as the law dictates, the council was supposed to make sure that every step throughout the 5 years you were being monitored and helped along. The council should have been doing that. So whatever problems you're running into, unfortunately, the council didn't play that role. And I'm not going to fault the current council member because you weren't part of that. This is 3 years before you existed. Okay? But there are issues that Senator Castro and I would like to see resolved. We didn't get elected to close schools. I've got testimony from Dr. Velma Sablan, saying how great Guam Academy is doing. I've got testimonies from parents saying how great Guam School is doing. But there's just a question of the responsibility of the trustees. And it's in the law to meet the 5 years accreditation. But we'll wait for legal review when the AGs come out, and we'll find out where we need to go. Okay, we're not up to trying to find a way to close you. When I asked for the legal review, it's just to determine if the council was in the authority to grant the renewal. And if it is, and the AG said it is, then we live with it. If it isn't, then let's find a way to keep the school open. But we got to make sure we're doing what's within the law. To actually ask us to try to amend the law today, it's not going to happen. We're 2 years late on that. There's 2 years behind for Guam. The council should have been involved in that. The previous senators before our time should have addressed that, whoever was overseeing education. And before that even. But today we just want to find a way to help every charter school that exists. And we want to make sure DOE is also not footing the bill for any mismanagement, misfunding, or whatever they want to claim. Because I've read their resolution. They don't want nothing to do with the Guahan, with charter schools. Fine. If not, be in charge of it. That's what they want. Either in charge or not involved at all. Fine. They want the budget separated? Fine. I just need to convince the speaker on that and my colleagues to separate it. How do you separate education? Everybody has to take a bite at it. It is not just charter school. It's also DOE. Okay? The question may be posed during our budget is that is $6,500 the amount that should be given to the charter school? Because $6,500 is per student. It's not given to DOE that I understand. Because I've talked to almost every principal at DOE. Do you get $6,500 per student at your school? And they said, if we did, especially from Simon Sanchez would have been rebuilt already. Okay? So let's not all get defensive too much. Let's just relax and let's just come to terms of what we need to do to take care of all the students we need to take care of. Across the board. DOE, Guahan, Island, whoever's out there. Because that's what we're here for. We're here to help you. We're not here to go against anybody. Okay?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Before I acknowledge the speaker, I want to recognize the presence of my colleague, Senator Estevez, Fernando Estevez. Thank you for joining us, Senator. Mr. Speaker, did you want to offer comments, sir?
I was just a little concerned with the discussions. Initially, the initial charter to GACS, I thought was questionable because I didn't think that any charter could have all three in it. So I thought that was faulty to begin with. Then the most recent action by the council, if you felt that you needed to give them time to get their accreditation, was it absolutely necessary to pass a resolution to renew their charter for 5 years? Could there not have been a probationary renewal for a year to see whether or not they were going to comply? I don't understand why it absolutely had to be a 5-year renewal. You just compounded a charter that was faulty, including all three, and then expanding it to a fifth one. Both of them have violated the law. I don't think the initial one with all three complied with the law, and I don't think this approval of another 5-year when they had no accreditation will stand. So I just don't see how it can possibly be funded.
Could I answer that, Mr. Speaker?
Sure.
As I went through the process of deciding whether or not to renew the charter of Guahan Academy, that issue was definitely obvious. But in reading the law, we saw that there was not an alternative step to, we either had to approve or to renew the charter, disapprove the charter, and putting it on probation would have had to have been done earlier, because now we were at the drop dead date. The charter was ending. And so we couldn't, if we did it a year before, we could have. However, the law did allow for an annual review and then placing the school in probation should we need to do so. And at least from my perspective, if there were still issues, then we could always, on the annual review, place the school in probation and then remove, and then place steps to revoke the charter. And that could have been done within a year.
When this council wants to be creative, it can be creative. Last Christmas, when I told you guys that I was going to be the Grinch of Christmas and tell you that there was absolutely no money to be able to add additional ones, in spite of my admonishment, you gave conditional. Where in the statute is there a conditional? And trying to figure out where these new schools are going to be getting their money starting this month, because the appropriation isn't going to start until October. You guys keep compounding the problem because you keep creating. I said, well, do something for the next school year. It had to be this year that you guys passed it.
Well,
I don't know where you're going to fund it because it's not coming out of the appropriation bill. It's coming out from my committee.
As I understood it, with the middle school that was approved for the charter would be starting this school year. However, the high school, if approved, would have started next school year, not this current school, coming school year. Are you referring to, which school were you referring to? The middle
DOE
school?
is currently getting requests for when are they going to get their money. They're already getting requests because they want to hire people, they want to do all kinds of things to start up these new schools.
That's CIFA.
And I'm just saying, I don't know where there is any money for this. And if you guys are going to keep running off and doing this, then raise your own funds. I mean, it's not going to happen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Senator Aceves.
I'd like to thank my colleagues, and I'd like to thank for those being present and participation in this roundtable. Apologize for my tardiness in the portion discussing the bill. I do fully support the bill, and I think there are some issues that were brought up. Just so you know, at least my individual responses, I actually would be in support of the abolishment of the Charter School Council and putting it under the Board of Education. I think, especially in a time of fiscal uncertainty moving forward, I think additional bureaucracy is counterproductive to what we're trying to do in terms of efficiency. And if we're not going to be able to fully fund and support the Charter School Council, I think we do need to at least put it under the appropriate authority. And now to further support this, I kind of want to highlight two things that, at least in my tenure in the legislature, have been put up with regards to inconsistency of things approved by the council and how that affects us in the legislature. And first being, I believe it was last year's budget hearing where the council had approved an increase in enrollment for their charter moving forward with students. And that, at that time, was problematic because there was no funding source available for that. That does not, when that happened, that did not put the legislature in a position or does not force action upon this body, this elected body, in order to fund that. And I think secondly was the issue with regards to renewal of the charter and being in a position where there wasn't a lot of flexibility in terms of moving forward. I think historically, what we've seen, we have seen successes in the charter school, and we can't deny that with the students. But I think the issue really lies in how efficiently we're managing the schools in terms of administration and moving forward. And I think having this all under the umbrella of Department of Education with regards to processing of invoices, processing of procurement, and in terms of including it into their budget requests to ensure that everybody is on the same page prior to moving that towards the legislature, I think is a much more efficient practice. And I would like to hear your thoughts on it. I do appreciate the testimony from Mr. Babalta and your recommendation in the abolishment of the council as opposed to increasing the number. I do know that there is a desire for autonomy for the charter schools, and I think will be arguments that it's imperative to the success of the charter schools. But again, you know, as a sitting senator, we can't ignore the fiscal realities of the government as a whole, and trying to assure success of both the charter schools and Department of Education, I think is essential, and that's something we all truly want. Now, I do have concerns, though, with the latest decision to renew the charter as opposed to maybe working with the legislature in terms of the ability to add a probational basis as to the charter, because I am well aware there are other charter schools that want an opportunity. And we have to be fair to that, that even though we see success in Guahan, the academy, we can't ignore the fact that we might see success in others, such as vocational training, vocational schools that want to try to avail themselves to funding and to try charters, because I think we all agree that different methodologies of education work for different students. That's kind of the whole precept of the charter school concept. And we have to be fair to that moving forward. So, you know, I'm really glad we're having these discussions. I'd like to hear from the council members on your thoughts about abolishing the council and putting it under the purview of Department of Education, with perhaps increasing, and I do want to add to that with the caveat that I think it's be important that if we do this, that it's important that the Board of Education have a representative for the charter schools as a sitting member. And I just want your thoughts on, I guess, the proposals being discussed.
Thank you, Senator. Madam Chair.
Just for clarification, so the last fiscal year budget, I believe the three of us were not part of that. I thank you for your concern, Speaker, for bringing them up again, as he has before. For this fiscal year, though, I know there were issues about the enrollment number and the approval of the number. It was made clear during the meeting that even if the council does approve an enrollment number, and that being 873 for GACS, 620 for iLearn, and 350 for CIFA, even if the legislature budget law does say that the enrollment number is less, then it would go with they would comply with the budget law number. That was one thing that was brought up in the meeting. So I just wanted to make that clarification, because I'm not too sure if the previous council had put that same discussion up during the budget meetings, but that's something that this council had to. As far as the concerns for the dissolution of the Charter School Council, so the same concern I brought up earlier is just to ensure that the Charter School Council is an authorizing board as opposed to the Education Board being a policy board. So just ensuring that the responsibilities are carefully planned out. We all know that there are concerns in the charter school law that need to be addressed. That hasn't been a secret. It's been something we've discussed, and something I think that we've come to find out more, because I believe this council is more active than it ever has been, for obvious reasons with the applications and whatnot, and being able to meet quorum for a first time. So that was just something I had mentioned earlier. So just some clarifications.
Councilmember.
Senators and Mr. Speaker, when I first was asked to be a member of the council, I did some research on some of what was occurring stateside with respect to charter schools. And one of the first document that I wanted to do research on was the program review report that's been formulated by some of the program reviews that occurred in some of the states in back of the mainland. And I came across the program review report from the state of New Hampshire. And one of the highlights of that program review report is that when they had an administrative support person for the charter schools council or the management of charter schools, the ability of the state to effectively monitor and ensure that progress is being made with the charter schools was working very well. But as soon as budget wasn't made available for that administrative support person, the leadership and management of the charter schools was not as progressive as when it had a support person. So that's really one of the impetus behind my position that if we're going to continue to function without no support staff, with no resources, really, if we're going to do a good job in monitoring the charter schools and following the rules of the law, I would favor transitioning the duties and responsibilities of the council to the Guam Education Policy Board.
Thank you, Councilmember. I appreciate you qualifying your original position. I'll go ahead and take comment from Mr. Vince Leanguero, the governor's authorized representative, but then I want to encourage my colleagues, unless they have additional comment about what's been said, I want to encourage everyone now to let's focus, because I understand one or more of you may need to leave by 2:30. And again, to restate, I'd like to have addressed in the event that the Attorney General should opine, render her position that negates the council's decision, I'd like to address that question with our Department of Education stakeholders here, the council chairperson, the governor's authorized representative, the chair of GACS. I think that's what we need to get to once we have an opportunity to address some of the issues that were raised. Okay, so with that said, Mr. Vince Leanguero.
So I'm going to speak, Vince Leanguero, Special Assistant to the Governor. I'm going to speak very narrowly to the question that was asked, how does one feel about separating the budget, right? So, and subsuming the responsibilities of the council and giving that to the State Board of Education. So just narrowly focusing the response to that. Giving the response, dissolving the council and giving the responsibilities for oversight for existing and new schools, new charter schools, to the State Board, the Guam Education Board, it's akin to letting the fox guard the hen house. As a career government employee, I spent my entire career at the Department of Education. So I speak as an insider. I highly value public education. I went to public schools here in Guam. My kids went to public schools. And I'll say this about the public schools. As good as a job as they've done, and they've made great strides over the past 7.5 years, more than I've seen in a long period of time, since I started in DOE in 1978 and retired in 2005 as a head of special ed. So I speak from that experience. It's like the largest super carrier ship. It takes a long time to execute a left turn because it's just so massive and large. Charter schools offer the opportunity to challenge that large bureaucracy, and with its autonomy, with its ability to govern itself and run, they offer a challenge to that large bureaucracy. If we don't have these schools, if we don't authorize them to exist, then we have a bureaucracy where it's any organization. Inertia is the most powerful force that exists. You won't have innovation. You won't have any desire to move from where you're at today to where you need to be tomorrow. And I say this as a long-time career DOE employee. I know it for a fact. Good intentions, good, but the changes, as great as they've been over the past 7 years, they're going to be challenged to stand up and take note. Every child that pulls out of DOE to go to a charter school is money out of their pocket. And the way we as human beings react, when you're taking money out of my pocket, I stand up and I take note. And the way that it will cause DOE is to reflect and say, whoa, why are these parents walking with their money and going to a charter school? What are we not offering that requires them to say, we give up on you, we're going to go with them? That type of pressure is necessary for DOE to continue to stay on its toes, to have its A game day in and day out, year after year. And I would really, really appeal to the policymakers to consider to keeping the charter schools as a viable option for parents to choose, and you've already created the policy that up to 7 schools can exist. And we asked in Bill 191 to amend that 7 so that you don't have the converted schools and non-converted schools and limitation on that. Make it all, whatever, any 7 schools. And at the end of that 7-school experiment, evaluate as policymakers whether or not it's a viable model and whether it should continue to exist. Do you need to give more charter schools? You shouldn't answer that question until this school has been the first one that's been authorized. They've only been in existence for 5 years. I learned they're in their 2nd year, right? We need a little more time to show. But meanwhile, DOE is reacting. They're going, oh my gosh, they authorized a 3rd school. You know how much that's going to mean in terms of the reduction in our budget? It's causing them to sit up and take notice. And that's good. That's good outside pressure. It's not good in their pocketbooks. It's not good in their budget. But I hate to say this, that type of pressure is necessary to continue to keep them to have that level of awareness and to question and to reflect and to examine their practices, examine what they're offering, and wonder why that they have customers that are walking away and taking their money with them. I urge this body to continue to keep that intact. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Leandro. Mr. Speaker?
I was just wondering if anyone would, because I'm trying to Google it now, how many states in the country have charter schools under their state board of education? No, not the U.S. Department, but the State Board of Education.
I can't clarify that number for you right now, but I can get you the number later. But I know, for example, New Hampshire was the example that was brought up. They have a local authorizing board, then they have the state authorizing board. So it would be, there's the local one would count similar to the council, and then the state would go directly to DOB. And so the makeup is very different across the line. It's not consistent, it's not a cookie cutter, which is one thing that I think is important to discuss when we talk about bringing it together under Department of Education or whatnot. That's something that we need to consider, because it's not straight line across the board.
No, I understand, but Guam is only 160,000 people. We're smaller than most school districts in the States. And this impossibility of turning the ship of state left or right, there are states with tens of millions of students, and they're able to do it in Texas, in Arizona, Washington State. Just a simple Google.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Everybody at the table, unless I'm reading my Gmail calendar wrong, the first day of GACS is in 5 weeks. 5 weeks. And so let's shift gears. Well, you have July, so if you count number of weeks, today is June 27th. Okay, so 6 weeks? Okay, so about 7 weeks. Let's give it 8. 2 months. So we have 8 weeks, 7.5 weeks. Thank you for the correction. I appreciate that. Whether it's 8 or 10 or 4, let's shift gears here and answer the question or help us understand this best. And I would appreciate DOE's participation. I know we had this discussion, at least in some part, yesterday in a work session with the Chairman of Education and some reps from the board to include the superintendent. In the event that the decision by the council is nullified, what next? What potential plans are in place to deal with the reality that Guahan may not be authorized to operate into August? Is that a fair and accurate question, Mr. Chairman? I mean, well, you can work with me and wordsmith that, but I think you know where I'm going with this. So have considerations been made in terms of that potential reality?
You know, it is important that we have discussions regarding what's going to happen to the students. Obviously, there's more than 700 students currently at GACS who are anticipating enrollment. That discussion will occur between DOE, the superintendent, obviously, and of the two other charter schools that are currently, the one existing and the one that's coming up. Also, I believe finances is still something that needs to be discussed. So that will, of course, involve discussion with the council, GACS, and the internal auditor and DOE. So that would be the next step, be having those conversations. So GACS would have to be a part of it, both.
Thank you, Vince, if you could jump in.
So this is uncharted territory, Mr. Chair. Are you asking people to come to the table with a presumed opinion from the Attorney General and begin planning?
No, I'm not, but I will require that somebody pay attention to the details of a potential shutdown of a school. I'm not done. You have to assume everything at this point in time, 8 weeks out. And I've been struggling with my chairman, struggling with my colleagues, not to delve into the specifics of operations, whether it's for Guahan or the council or DOE itself. And now, as the new chairman of a subcommittee, we are at this tipping point. And I can't blame public policy. I can't blame a particular segment of the statute not being revised. But I will blame us all if we don't have a plan in place to disperse kids or take care of them in their current state. You know, Mr. Babauta, we had a conversation. We've had conversations separately. I think we're all in agreement that you got to protect one thing. And it ain't management, it ain't operations, it certainly isn't the council. It's the students. And so if we're going to engage for the first time in a brainstorming session, I'm going to budget 20 minutes to that because I want the public to know that somebody's paying attention to this. I'm not talking about we're going to have a conversation. I'm talking about what possibilities are on the table today. And if I have to start it, I will. Because in the absence of a plan, we are in crisis mode. And I always defer to the better judgment and goodwill of our people because there's a lot of smart people here. But I can't allow another week or two to go by and hope that we're getting it together. I've attempted on many times to bring leaderships from the various stakeholder groups to my office. And I'm not here to report on who came or didn't come. I'm here to say we're here today without a subpoena or anything drastic like that. And so I'm asking, please, share your ideas on what could possibly happen in the event that something drastic for the Attorney General. And I'll allow the Council Chair and then Mr. Leon Guerrero, because in my humble opinion, I think we've had informal discussions about an interim strategy that would do less to disrupt the learning, the teaching and learning that's going on, not necessarily the operations, but the teaching and learning that's going on at that living and thriving community. And if you haven't been there, and I don't want you to report, please, who has or hasn't visited your school, but I have on more than one occasion. It is a living and thriving educational community. And so I want to choose the right words, and I want to just humbly ask that we please contrive, at least put out for the first time for the public's consumption, what our thoughts are. And I'll start with you, Madam Chair, and the Governor's authorized representative.
Sure. First, I'd like to say whether the vote went yes for renewal or went no for renewal, the council obviously had a strategy for the vote. Obviously, the charter was renewed, and so the plan that was unveiled was there would be two committees, one to address finance, which is headed by Enki Tovis, and one to handle accreditation, which is currently under Sal Babauta. So that was what would happen with the renewal. If the charter was not renewed, which of course we still have to considering the pending letter to the Attorney General, the option would be, once again, we still would have to have two committees. We can't just leave our students and our parents hanging dry. We understand that, and that has never been the intention of the council. I want to make that clear again. That has never been and never will be the intention of the council, which is the reason why we're bringing together the stakeholders. Should it not be renewed, or should there be a change because of the Attorney General's letter and whatnot, there will be a committee that will include DOE, iLearn as the existing charter school, CIFA as the possible upcoming charter school, and GACS to see what we can do about students. Also, there has been discussions previously in the meetings which DOE and several of the council members have brought up about what villages these students do come from. So we are able to see which public schools would have to absorb the students. So that discussion has happened, might not have happened just during that one meeting that we did have, but it has happened before. We understand that finances are a concern, and that continues to be a concern. We understand that. There will also be a committee for that as well, involving GACS, involving DOB and the Internal Auditor's Office. If there are more people need to be at the table, of course, we'll bring them, and I've always kept our oversight chair and vice chair up to date on that. I don't think you two have ever had issues with me communicating with you, and we won't have that problem. So that is what the plan is, for the record.
Tess, I appreciate your response. I'll defer to Vince. I just want to offer comment. So if I was to summarize that, there will be a meeting. Okay. Just so I'm clear, this has elevated beyond the council. This is now a community concern. And so I don't necessarily mean to suggest it's your responsibility, Chairwoman, alone. I think it's all of us. We all bear the burden and partial responsibility for the current state of affairs at Guahan Academy Charter School as the prime mover, the first of all charters. It's not as important to me as who's responsible for what along the way, more than it is about what we're going to do going forward. And that's beyond just this chair. It includes you, and it includes the chairman of the board, of the education board. It includes the governor's authorized representative, who's been intimately involved or at least privy to the discussions. And so with my acknowledgement of the chief executive of this government, I know that he's been made aware of the situation, the circumstances surrounding Guahan. So thank you. I heard the word absorption. Okay, I'm hoping that I hear other alternatives. So absorptions would suggest dissolution. I'm not for or against it at this point in time. I think we're going to go back and huddle and figure out what the alternatives may be. So that's one possibility. Are there any other possibilities? But before I acknowledge anyone else, Madam Chair, if I may, Mr. Leangro, you may speak next.
I'd like to echo that as the council approached its meeting date with the decision on renewal, they were looking at two possible options, and discussions had been raised about the focus should be on the students. Should they renew it? What do we need to do to make sure that they do get accredited, right? If they don't renew them, again, uncharted territory. What do we do with the business side of closing out the business, because it is a business, it's a nonprofit business, but it is a business, and you've got obligations, legal and financial, that need to be closed out. And then what do we do with the student side, the family side, the teachers, the staff? Those are all things, and that's why the chair, as she stated, created those two committees in either direction that the decision was going to go. And I thought that was a great move. To their credit, DOE has been always wanting to talk about both potentialities and what they need to do in either direction that the decision goes. And DOE has been contingency planning, if you will. I know that John Fernandez has shared with me concerns, and the concerns has always been based on what is best for the students, regardless of the decision that's going to be made. And that's been the approach that has been taken. So there have been proactive thoughts and discussions, but they needed to get to the direction based on the council's decision. And so I can tell you that the foundation was established for two committees. Regardless of which direction the decision was going to go, the two committees were going to be the starting point. And I can tell you that at all points in time, Guahan Academy has to be, and all of their stakeholders have to be part of that discussion in either direction. DOE, of course, as the one who has the greatest potential for absorbing the kids, would have to be part of that discussion. From the governor's office, it would be, what is the impact on busing? What are we going to do with the facility? You know, and those types of things. So I think that, you know, the assurance has to be provided to this body that there was quite a bit of thinking that was put behind prior to going into that meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Leangro, and then I'll acknowledge you, Madam Chair, real quick. First of all, I thought it was a good move to involve the council in that capacity, and I appreciate you highlighting it was done possibly and not solely in reaction to closure. But I like the other inference there, that it was designed also to assist in designing a corrective action strategy to sustain the school should we be able to move forward with the existing structure. I'm not talking management. I'm talking the existing arrangement with Guahan as a standalone charter. So either or can happen. I appreciate that. Madam Chair?
Yeah, thank you, Senator Castro. I want to go back to the provisions of the charter law under Section 12114 on the basis of how you revoke or you put any charter school on probation. 5 of those provisions of the law does not apply to the Guahan Academy Charter School. A portion of that law says you have to be accredited in 5 years. Any timeline on accreditation has always been 6 years. You put that on the WASC timeline, and all of the timeline says 6 years. So we are not there yet. Our accreditation was kind of like withheld because of the facilities issue, not on the academic part. I want to make that clear to everybody. The second part of that, 12114 and 12115, carries on the appeal process. You close me down or you close the school down, there is an appeal process. So there is a lot of things that we can do after the school shuts down. It doesn't mean necessarily the school and the children will go. And thank you, DOE, for offering that. When we have over-enrollment, you offer to open your doors, but none of the parents would like to leave. I like to make it, I like to emphasize the fact that the creation of the charter law was really to, just what Vince had alluded earlier, it's really to get the choice of the parents and where to go and where the better academic performance of the kids are getting honed and being delivered. So I want to be able to state the fact that there is an appeal process. You just don't go and shut down the school and look for the alternative where to go and here to go. And I'm quite sure there are timelines on the appeal process. You can look at that portion of the law, and that's where we're going to go, Senator. And thanks for everybody that's offering help right now. DOE is one of them. The council, thank you, Madam Chair. And I think we still think that since the law have created the council to be the oversight and even the body that authorized all charter operations of Guam, and they have made decision, and it was all in their minutes and their approval of a 5-year continuation of our charter, then the legislature now is stepping in and question that. I respect that, just to clarify, and maybe when that's clarified, we all go and hopefully that is something that will all be clarified in the many things that the charter law is flawed about. So this is just one instance where we just say that we will go to the appeal process. We will still be beholden. We are still accepting the 5-year approval of our council, of the authorizers, and then let's see what happens after that, Senator. It's not going to be doomsday for us. We never feel that way, but whatever happens, we will be ready.
I just want to ask a follow-up. So Chairman Sonagsine is next. In terms of what Guahan is doing to help itself, you're stating for the record that you've already filed the appeal to WASC. Was that accurate, ma'am?
It's very true, Senator. Today we have given you copies of the progress that we have with the WASC, and they have just to impanel the board that will have to look back into an issue that does not exist anymore, which is the facility. We're not anymore in that facility, but in the old facility where we have held our high school and our grade school, the old Tijan campus. So that issue with WASC doesn't exist anymore. So we are going to go back to them and appeal to them and let them know that that doesn't exist anymore. Because there was really nothing on academic, but it was just really that facility that said it was congested, it was not conducive for the learning of our kids. But so be it. We'll work with them continuously, Senator, as I've assured you in our meetings.
Thank you, Chair. Chairman San Agustin.
Okay, thank you, Senator Castro. Ms. Fay, as you cited in the law, 12107, duties and powers and other requirements of charter school, that was the responsibility of the charter school itself, the 5 years.
Yes, sir. We agree.
Nobody else but the charter school. Okay, we're in agreement on that, right?
Yes, sir, Senator.
And the only reason why I stepped in was because everybody's asking that question. Should the council have granted it? In the law, exactly what Art brought up, Mr. Tovers brought up, is that in order to put the school, the charter school on probation, you first got to be legitimately a charter school, granted, a renewal, or in existence. So I'm just assuming that that's where he's leading towards, that if the candidates see the appeal don't come back, then you're subject to probation or revocation or whatever. That'll be up to the council to decide.
And they
but,
did.
But as the Speaker Cruz has brought up, we have CIFA, I think that other charter schools is in line.
Yes.
Because of the renewal, Madam Chair here, you need to make it very clear to them that as long as Guam still exists and Island exists, there's no funding for anybody else. If I'm correct, I mean, I think that's the message I'm getting from the Speaker. There's no money available. So no other charter school should assume they should start asking for money. And I'd only recommend that the Charter School Council take a look at what's going on. And I understand you need administrative help. There's no doubt about that. And I agree with Mr. Leon Guerrero, whereas if we give it to the Department of Education, Guam Education Board, it's got to change. That's my position. That the Guam Education Board would not be the way it's formed to be an oversight. It can't be. It's no different as when they took away the certification office. And I was the chairman of the board. When the charter school was created, I was the chairman of the board. Not a problem. But if we're going to amend the law, and if I'm going to introduce any bill, or any of my colleagues introduce a bill that talks about creating a state board, it's got to be higher than the Guam Education Board. Because it can't just, can't be the fox watching the hen. It just doesn't work that way. Even the Certification Commission has brought that to my attention, as some members on the board had asked to take over certification. I'm not going to change it. I'm going to leave it as it is because it's working. Certification office is working. Unfortunately, on the law today, that administrative officer is supposed to be helping you, the council. And maybe that's something I need to ask the certification office to make sure that that person is available, because the former chair of the council was at UOG and was able to use that administrative officer. You need help. There's no doubt about the council. If you're going to continue, you need help. But that being said, that's all I wanted to mention, is that we'll wait for the legal, and as soon as we get legal reviews, I will immediately call for a meeting, roundtable meeting, so that everybody knows what's coming down, unless the media gets it before I get it.
Yeah,
okay?
Mr.
So
Chair,
I'm here to help you guys. All right?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, let me just say that what brought us to this point is the inability for the council to perform its duties and responsibilities. It's because of the inability for this council to perform its duties and responsibilities. So if we're going to continue the way we are operating at this point in time, the expectations to ensure that the charter schools perform as prescribed by the law is almost minimal to none. I'm telling you right now. And it's showing, had there been enough support and resources, somebody would be monitoring the progress or the lack of progress of these schools. Some of these folks who are on this table, I've been with the council for a longer period of time, but yet what have been done? We are in this situation because of the inability for this council to do its job, as I said before. So, and the other thing that I'd like to bring up is the fact that this council has been discussing about the preparation for the opening of the school year, not just last week or the week before. It's been a progressive contention of this council to make sure that the opening of the school year is accomplished as such in a smooth manner, so we can prevent the parents from having to raise concerns about the lack of preparation. But I definitely recommend highly that if the council is going to remain as such, that it needs resources. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Vilalta. Senator Estevez has a follow-up, and then we'll go to the council chairperson if no other senator has comments.
Thank you, and this will also be my closing. You know, it was brought up by the chairman of the committee, and to be very clear in my understanding of it, it was none of us, I think most of us weren't here when Guahan Academy went before with their charter and asked for approval with full understanding of the law. I think it was also very clear, yes, I know we're highlighting issues now that we're discovering are issues, but you know, the governing board of the Guahan Academy, you know, it's not just people coming off the street saying, let's start up a charter school. These are people who, in my assumption, would have good understanding on how, on being administrators of education and setting up the school. And in many respects, they've done a fine job on the education and academics portion of it. My concerns moving forward, however, has been in the management. And so I don't necessarily want to discredit the idea of allowing Department of Education in some capacity to provide support. And if that means certain level of oversight, which I understand there are concerns, the fox guarding the hen house, sure. But I think the main thing you have to look at is the resources available at the Department of Education, the infrastructure available, the administrative infrastructure available. And so, you know, I do understand, yes, they're in a different time, maybe additional resources to the Guahan or to the council would be appropriate, and in order to monitor moving forward and help them succeed. But that's not the reality we face. I think the reality we face right now is there, you know, regardless of the pleas and regardless of what you do with it, there's just not going to be that money available. That's just the cold, hard reality facing the government of Guam. Department of Education already has struggles with the charter schools in their own cash management, but they do have the infrastructure, the administrative infrastructure available to assist. And just to be very clear on my position after researching and monitoring the situation moving forward, I don't believe that the council really needed to be in a position to monitor the success or whether or not they're mandating their charter. They're the ones voluntarily went before the council with all the assurances that they would be able to meet the requirements of the charter under the law. Nobody forced that. But what we have here now is we can't ignore the success of the students at the academy. So I think we all agree what the issue has been, I think in most part, which has been the management in moving forward. And so I wouldn't be in support of any legislation, just so we're very clear, me individually would not be in support of any legislation adjusting the law, because we have seen two charter schools that have successfully managed and have successfully met the requirements of their charter. And in moving forward, if we get into a position now where we're making special exceptions, then what's going to happen with the next charter school? And so we do have to take a position with the government. And so, or position as a government and as a governing body, and how we're going to move forward with that. Now, I do understand the decision for approving the charter. My recommendation is that at least the management aspect, not the academics, and how they're managing the academics and how they're educating the students and methodology. My proposal is that the management of the Guahan Academy charter schools be under full receivership of Department of Education until such a time that accreditation is received. And then the council can look, working with the school and stakeholders, as looking at a new executive leadership and a new management of the charter schools. But at this point, considering the funding still comes from the same coffers, which is taxpayer dollars, I think there's still a responsibility that the education of the children, the positive effects of the charter school still be maintained. But we can't ignore the fact that there have been some concerning management issues moving forward. And so if we all agree that there should be a focus on the children, I think we need to look at how to efficiently address some of the management issues to assure that they get their charter. Until such a time, I think Department of Education has the administrative infrastructure to move forward and see that happen in existence, funded at this time, as opposed to providing funding that's not available to the council, therefore creating a redundancy in that administrative infrastructure.
Thank you, Senator. And then we'll allow the council chair to speak, council member to speak. Ma'am, did you want to speak? And then we'll allow you, Madam Chair of Guahan, to say the last word, and I'll close this out with a public statement.
So just for clarification, I don't believe the previous chair actually did receive administrative support from the certification office. One of the big issues with providing administrative support from the certification office is that charter school instructors are not required to be certified. So you're bringing them in to do something that they aren't really allowed to regulate. So it's a very interesting part of the law. So that was the main thing I wanted to bring up. Second thing is that the law doesn't allow for how you mentioned receivership of management. There's not really a provision in the law that does allow for that, or for just the switching out of management, clearly. And obviously when the Bill 191 was introduced, and we did come here and we did talk to our oversight, so we appreciate that discussion. That was 6 months ago and so much has changed. Do I think we still need to revisit the law? Of course. Do I still think charter schools are a valuable asset to the community? Of course. I wouldn't be on this council if I didn't believe that. But definitely the law was done an earlier time, 2009, and we're here now. So definitely think that discussion needs to come up, and I appreciate the discussion that happened today on that.
Thank you for that. Just to clarify what I meant, I do understand that there isn't a provision in the law for receivership. However, I just want to be very clear. I am not in support of extending the time frame for accreditation under the current charter law, but I am in support of an amendment to the law to allow for that receivership to avail the resources that are currently in place at Department of Education.
Thank you, Senator and Chairperson Blas. Madam Chair, would you like to close out?
Thank you, Senator, for your time, for meeting with us for the past how many days on the different approaches that we can better the operation of GACs. Thank you, Senator Esteves. We need your comment. Senator San Agustin. Moving forward, I think this really confirms that the law needs to be changed. The management that Senator Esteves is referring probably is it the Board of Trustees of the Guam Academy Charter School? We need to be specific, really, on what are the faults of the management, because this has been flaunted, this has been all over the media and everybody, but they haven't really put their fingers on what is the mismanagement as far as the fiscal part.
And let me be very careful, because I did not state mismanagement or corruption in any way, right?
No, I understand that, Senator, but you said...
So the issue at large, particularly, is the inability to receive accreditation within the time.
Yes,
the Board of Trustees was entrusted with the promulgation of the charter, and that's what I want to ensure, that when they took responsibility in saying we will achieve accreditation in 5 years, there has to be a measure of accountability. This is not, and I did mention this in my comments earlier, this is not to say that they have not done a wonderful job on the portion with regards to academics. And we see that in the success of the students at the Charter Academy. I'm not discrediting that at all. Yes. But with regards to management and the ability, if it being a facilities issue, that there are resources available. And so I don't want to look at receivership in such a bad way, right? I'm not the media. I'm not trying to sell a story. I'm trying to find you a means existing that's currently being funded, that we have money for, in order to help you achieve accreditation, and so that you can find full autonomy after the accreditation has been achieved. But what I mean, based on the recommendation and what has been stated by the council, I mean, I think we all know the current fiscal situation, and I'm just being quite honest and frank that we're not going to be able to provide additional resources to support.
Thank you for clarifying that, Senator Esteves. But we have sick the different people that have expertise on accreditation and have brought them to the table. Some of them have volunteered time, and adding up the resources that are available within DOE, that would be really helpful. And moving forward, we're here looking at Senator Will Castro, the chair, and you now, just to have the whole legislature to hear out, and all the efforts that we have done to meet whatever is the expectation as far as charter school is concerned.
And let's be clear, I don't want to see the charter school shut down.
Thank you.
Let me just make that very clear. I mean, you can't argue with the success of the students, and I want to base that as the foundation. But you know, when we highlight the issues, you know, how can we better support that with what we currently have available to us? And what can we do as policymakers to make that available to you, even if it's for a shorter period of time?
Yes.
And so again, when I use the word receivership, I don't want that to sound like such a negative thing, because I think there's a lot of positive things that could come out of it, and we can all benefit from in both moving forward with this and then in any setting a precedence for any other charter schools moving forward that might have issues with accreditation.
I thank you, Senator Estevez, and once again, I thank you, your committee, Senator Sanagustin, but I thank you so much for, to everybody, Amanda, Chairwoman, and council members here. We really want to pull together for the sake of these children from GACS are worth fighting for, because they have shown us really the deans and all the people that makes up GACS, not me, Senator, I don't want to take any credit on this, are really pulling all the resources together, time, even free time, for them to make everything good for GACS. So that I know, Senator, you know that we told him where we are as far as like the accreditation and everything is concerned.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to summarize, first of all, I'm extremely, I guess you could say, elated to hear from the Governor's Authorized Representative Vince. Also from the Chair, I want to commend her for her efforts to set up the correct the mechanism by which we can address some of the issues. Obviously, the political will is there from all the stakeholders. I think my colleague to my left and right have verbalized what I feel, that nobody, to include Vince and everybody at the table, wants to see GACS fail. So with that said, thank you again, Chair Blas. I look forward to the planning discussions that will address any one of the three potential strategies, not necessarily using my colleague's word, but we looked at the dissolution and absorption fully. We discussed very briefly, and I hope it's discussed at the planning meetings, the possibility of keeping the school in its current footprint with DOE's leadership, to use your term, receivership. But also I want to encourage us to explore the third and possible probationary extension, if maybe not for 5, but at least for 1, of the current charter under the whereas things may exist. I want to close out with some public announcements. It's part of the script here so that everybody listening and tuned in will know that the committee will continue to accept public testimony. Oh, actually, I'm off script. I have one question for you. So I see the two deans. Thank you so much for being here. Could you tell me who the head of school is? Do you have a lead administrator for Guahan Academy?
We have two positions that have been continuously opened. I think we'll be successful in bringing a CAO soon. That will be again announced in the public newspaper. We have brought in somebody on the finance side that will handle sort of like the procurement, all the business aspect, the operation. We've lost a couple of people there at one point in time, so we're bringing in a new person who's very much experienced. On the CAA, we'll continue to announce that, Senator, and work with any of your recommendations just to ensure that we have top choices on who we want to bring in as the Chief Academic Officer, which is a requirement by WASC anyway.
Exactly my point, and thank you. I want to strongly encourage you, without overstepping into the operational aspect of Guahan Academy, that I think it's mission critical that you identify and select and empower at least somebody from the academic component of the house to serve as a chief spokesperson for the school so that they may appropriately liaise with the accrediting body. I know many people who have been through the accreditation process who are here at the table, and we all know that you have to have a head of school. What you call that individual is not as important as the role that's defined that will lead us going forward so that we can address our concerns about management, policy, and operations, not to the chair of the board, but to the principal or to the head of school or to the CEO. But I strongly encourage you on behalf of my colleagues, and I don't need you to respond because I need to close this out. We've been called into special session, Madam Chair. The committee will continue to receive testimony for the next few days. Please address your written testimony to the subcommittee on charter schools, public libraries, and technology centers. Submit it via email at willcastro671@gmail.com. My office is located in Sanahanya at 777 Route 4 MVP Center, Unit 208. Thank you. God bless you for your time and effort, and Sudus Masi to the volunteers in the room. Thank you.